The door to Clive Harrington's office clicked shut behind me, muffling the low hum of the trading floor outside. He didn't bother with pleasantries. A sheet of paper slid across the polished desk with a snap of his wrist, like he was swatting away an insect. "Sign this resignation, or your career is over." His voice carried the brittle confidence of someone who believed threats and leadership were the same thing. I looked down at the page. A single line at the bottom waited for my name. 15 years reduced to one blank space. I thought about the late nights when the lights of Manhattan blurred through my office window, the endless cycles of financial storms I had steered this company through, the forecasting engines I had written line by line so numbers could tell the truth instead of fairy tales. Clive, of course, didn't know any of that. He had been here less than 3 months. His suit was cut sharp, his shoes gleamed, but his understanding of the infrastructure beneath him was paper thin. I took the pen, steady hand, no tremor. He leaned back, expecting resistance, maybe tears, maybe pleading. Instead, I signed in a single motion. When I looked up, his smirk faltered. "Good luck," I said, sliding the document across. But before I rose, I pressed a small yellow sticky note onto my own copy. Just 3 words written in my handwriting: Runbook, Barbara 9. 3 read before cutting. Clive didn't glance at it. He was too busy enjoying what he thought was a victory. I stood, straightened my blazer, and picked up the small box I'd already packed. A cracked mug from a conference years ago, my wireless mouse, and a handful of sticky notes that had survived 4 CEOs. That was all I chose to take. The walk through the office was strangely quiet. Denise from payroll looked up, her face pale. Her lips moved silently. "He'll regret this." I didn't nod. I didn't break stride. Greg from accounting leaned into the aisle, whispering. What happened? I gave him nothing but silence. At the security desk, Raymond lifted his eyes from a logbook. "You good?" he asked softly. "Golden," I answered, and I meant it. 15 years of my life, and all I carried out was a cardboard box. No farewell speeches, no framed photos, just scraps and a calm certainty that the company had just tripped over its own arrogance. By the time I pushed through the glass doors into the rush of midtown air, I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even angry. I was already imagining the moment when the systems I'd built would begin to speak without me, and the voice they carried would lead directly into the next morning. The F-train rattled beneath me as I balanced the box on my knees, the cracked mug clinking against the side with every turn. By the time I reached Brooklyn, the sun was already dropping behind the skyline, painting the streets in copper and shadow. I carried my small cargo up the narrow stairs, let myself into the apartment, and set the box on the counter like it was heavier than it looked. 15 years. That's how long I had given to them. 15 years of rewriting risk models in the dead of night so quarterly numbers wouldn't collapse, of staying during storms when executives vanished to their Hamptons houses, of guiding clueless managers through problems they couldn't even name. The company had survived 2 recessions not because of speeches in the boardroom, but because the numbers I built were solid enough to hold. And yet, through all of that, the ceiling above me never shifted. Senior financial systems architect, that was as far as I was allowed to climb. I still remembered the promotion meeting 5 years back. I had been shortlisted for vice president of analytics. The committee praised my work, acknowledged my contributions, then chose someone else because he played the room better. Translation, he laughed at the right jokes and bought the right scotch. I had gone home that night, poured myself tea instead of wine, and told myself it didn't matter. But it had. That memory still stung like an old bruise you forget until someone presses on it. I uncorked a bottle now, though, and poured a glass of red. Miles Davis floated from the speakers, the trumpet filling the corners of the apartment with a kind of melancholy that felt earned. I leaned back in my chair, cradling the glass, and told myself I was free. Free from politics. Free from the games. Free from men like Clive who thought intimidation could replace knowledge. My father had been a machinist in Buffalo, a man with grease under his fingernails and principles that didn't bend. He used to tell me, if you build something right, it'll speak for you when you're gone. That line had followed me into every late night I coded, every safeguard I slipped into place when no one else cared to notice. The company might think I was disposable. They might imagine that a signature erased me. But the truth was still alive, humming in the servers, waiting. And I knew it was only a matter of time before those silent systems began to speak without me. The next morning, I woke later than usual, sunlight already creeping through the blinds. For the first time in years, I hadn't set an alarm. I padded into the kitchen, still in my robe, poured myself coffee, and let the quiet settle around me. No emails demanding explanations, no meetings stacked back to back. Just silence. At 9:13, my phone buzzed across the counter, vibrating so hard it nearly toppled. I glanced at the screen. Douglas Rains, the CEO. He hadn't called me in all the years I'd been at the company. He preferred layers of assistance to shield him from real work. I answered anyway. Ava, he said without preamble. His voice clipped, tight, almost ragged. Our biggest client is in the lobby. Every dashboard is frozen. The job's failed overnight. Every error shows your name. Explain. I let silence stretch, long enough for him to hear his own breathing. I wanted him to feel it, the uncertainty, the recognition of who he was speaking to. Finally, I said, calm as glass. I already did. Yesterday, with my signature. He stumbled over the next words. Ava, this is catastrophic. We need you here. Now. No, I replied. Not like before. Not without terms. I could almost hear the shuffle of papers, the creak of leather chairs in the background, the weight of board members pressing in on him. I pictured Clive pacing behind him, sweating in his polished shoes, realizing for the first time that intimidation wasn't a plan. My terms are simple. I continued. A formal consulting agreement, executed before I touch a single line. Written indemnification that I operate under your direction, not the CFO's. Temporary credentials issued through legal, with logs and witnesses. And when this is over, we talk structure, not patchwork. He exhaled hard, like a man drowning. You're asking for too much. I'm asking for clarity, I said, sipping my coffee. If the company wants me, it will be clean. If not, you'll have to explain to the client why their systems are locked until further notice. A pause. Then the sound of resignation in his tone. You'll have it. Everything. Just get here. Make it 15 minutes, I said lightly. I'm still finishing breakfast. I ended the call and set the phone down. The steam from my cup curled into the air, soft and steady. Clive thought a resignation erased me. Instead, it turned the tables. And by the time I walked back into that building, I would no longer be their employee. I would be their only option. By late morning, I was walking back into the glass tower in Midtown, the same lobby I had exited with a cardboard box less than 24 hours earlier. The receptionist nearly dropped her tablet when she saw the plastic badge clipped to my jacket. The word stamped across it in bold letters was clear consultant. For the first time in 15 years, I wasn't theirs, I was mine. Whispers followed me through the security gates. Some stared openly, others pretended to check their phones. The shock in their faces felt almost like a welcome, though no one dared speak. They had all seen me leave. Now I was back under terms of my own design. Rachel Vega, the quiet hawk from the security team, was waiting near the elevators. She gave me a nod of recognition, the kind that said more than words. "Follow me," she said. And I did. She led me not to my old corner, but to a glass huddle room stripped bare except for a loaner laptop, a stack of printed diagrams, and the smell of strong tea she'd set on the table. "Read-only tokens," she said, sliding over a slip of paper with a username and QR code. "Calibration endpoint whitelisted once legal clears it." I logged in. The system greeted me like an old friend, streams of logs unfurling across the screen at 6:09 p.m. the night before. My admin group had been forcibly removed. At midnight, the watcher process I designed flagged the change, froze the pipelines, and triggered the calibration lock, exactly as it was meant to. Truth doesn't panic, it just waits. But as I scrolled deeper, a line of code caught my eye, a scheduled job, buried under innocuous labels, set to execute during the next board review. Its output forecast numbers inflated just enough to please investors, but untethered from reality. Clive hadn't just wanted me gone. He had wanted me out of the way so his false numbers could slide into circulation unchecked. If the safeguards hadn't tripped, the company would have been parading lies before shareholders within days. I leaned back, heartbeat steady but sharp with recognition. Proof was sitting in front of me. Proof that arrogance wasn't just dangerous, it was deliberate. I didn't speak it aloud. Not yet. Rachel sipped her tea, watching me over the rim of the cup, but I only jotted a quick note in my pad. Power isn't always in what you reveal. Sometimes it's in what you hold back, waiting for the moment when the truth costs the most. And the moment was coming fast, carried in on the next request from the CEO. Douglas arrived in the huddle room with the weight of the building pressing down on his shoulders. His tie was crooked, his eyes darting between me and the idle laptop like it was a bomb about to detonate. Rachel stood at the corner, arms folded, silent but steady. I gestured toward the frozen interface on the screen. "Your numbers aren't broken," I said evenly. They're paused. That's policy, not sabotage. Douglas swallowed hard. "Our client doesn't care what you call it. They're in the lobby right now. They expect answers. They'll get them." I replied, sliding into the chair, "But first, they'll get the truth." I entered the read-only credentials Rachel had given me and started combing through the system. The logs lined up exactly as I'd seen earlier: admin role removed, freeze triggered, calibration pending. Nothing chaotic, just safeguards working as designed. I explained each step aloud, forcing Douglas to hear it in plain English. "Currency feed," I muttered, spotting the first hiccup. "Glitching, like it always does on Mondays." I patched the data source, documented the fix. Next, a vendor code fat-fingered by someone on the late shift. I corrected it, logged it, cross-verified. Then weight drifts in the promo model within tolerance but worth flagging. I adjusted thresholds and attached a note. Rachel activated the recorder, her voice steady as she announced each step for the file. "Witnesses matter." Finally, the interface lit up, the button glowing with the words, "Renable rights." One click and everything would flow again. I hovered my finger above it, then looked squarely at Douglas. "Not yet," I said. "This doesn't happen again without changes. Dual owner model. Deputies trained. No more single points of failure, me or anyone else. In writing. Today." His jaw tightened. "Ava, this is not the time. It's exactly the time." I cut in. "Your client is waiting. Your dashboards are dark, and your CFO doesn't even understand what just happened. You want me to fix this? Then you fix the structure." Douglas's forehead glistened. He glanced at Rachel, then back at me. The silence stretched, heavy as concrete. At last, he gave a short, jerky nod. Agreed. In writing. Only then did I press the button. The job queue unclenched. Data surged. Dashboards refreshed in waves of green. The building seemed to exhale. Relief rippled across the floor outside as whispers traveled faster than the numbers themselves. I sat back, calm, while Douglas wiped his brow. The system was breathing again, but I knew Clive wouldn't take this humiliation quietly. The dashboards were glowing again, but the tension in the air hadn't loosened. Douglas stood by the glass wall, phone buzzing nonstop, trying to placate board members. I was documenting every adjustment I had made when the door pushed open and Rachel strode in, her face pale but determined. She carried a single-page printout in her hand. She slid it across the table toward me. "You'll want to see this." At the top of the log file was a timestamp from just after dawn. Below it, attempted alteration of audit flag source, workstation CFO ASST02 denied, recorded, stamped. I didn't need more context. Clive had tried to cover his tracks. The system had caught him. Douglas stepped closer, reading over my shoulder, lips tightening. Before he could speak, the door banged open again. Clive Harrington stormed in, shoulders squared, jaw set. He carried his usual smugness, though it cracked faintly around the edges. "This is unnecessary," he snapped, ignoring Douglas and locking eyes with me. "We can export last quarter's data, adjust deltas, smooth the story. Clients don't care about plumbing, they care about results." I picked up the printout, set it down between us, and tapped the damning line of text. "This is why we build seatbelts." For the first time since I'd met him, he flinched, not much, but enough. Douglas remained silent, his gaze fixed on the evidence like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Rachel cleared her throat softly. "That's not all," she said. She turned to me. "The junior analyst on the compliance team came to me this morning. Clive told him to accept responsibility if anyone asked about irregular jobs. Said it would look better if it came from a small mistake." I watched Clive's face as Rachel spoke. His mask slipped. Just a hair, but enough to show the contempt behind the polish. He broke down. Rachel added quietly. "Told me everything. He was terrified." Clive's smirk faltered. He turned to Douglas. "This is being blown out of proportion. A young analyst misunderstood a directive." "No." I cut in, my voice even. "He understood perfectly. You pressured him to take the fall. That isn't leadership. That's desperation." The room went still. Clive shifted on his feet, his cologne too strong, filling the silence he couldn't. Douglas's hands pressed against the back of a chair, knuckles whitening. I leaned forward slightly. "The systems don't lie, Clive. You can bully people, but you can't bully code. It records everything, and right now, it's recording you." Rachel placed the printout back on the table. "The client team is already upstairs," she said to Douglas. "They'll want an explanation." Douglas nodded slowly, still staring at the log. The meeting with Priya and Ben was minutes away, and every word that followed would decide whose version of reality the client would believe. I closed my notebook, slipped the printout inside, and stood. The truth was walking into the room with me, and this time, I wasn't the one on trial. The boardroom smelled faintly of overbrewed coffee and expensive nerves. Glass walls surrounded us, the city sprawling beyond, but every eye was fixed on the long table where two of the client's top executives had settled in. Priya Deshmukh, their VP of Finance, sat straight-backed, her eyes sharp as scalpels. Beside her, Ben Kessler, Director of Operations, tapped a pen against his notebook with deliberate impatience. Douglas introduced me briefly, then retreated into silence, leaving the weight of the moment squarely on my shoulders. Priya didn't waste time. "Convince me," she said flatly. Convince me why the system freezing this morning was a good thing. I met her gaze. Because it's a seatbelt, I said. Annoying when parked. Essential when moving. When my credentials were stripped without a handoff, the system didn't gamble. It locked down. It waited for calibration from someone with context. That's not failure, it's protection. Ben leaned forward. Our procurement team saw a yellow badge at 9 a.m. They called me before my first coffee. You know how that looks? Yes, I replied, which is why I'm not showing you excuses. I'm showing you evidence. I projected the first file, last night's validated snapshot, intact and audited. Then I flipped to the recalibrated view from today, annotated with every correction currency feed hiccup, vendor code fix, weight drift adjustment, no manual overrides, no invisible hands, just clean logs and verifiable truth. Priya's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. Ben's pen stopped tapping. Fine, Ben said. What's your SLA if this happens again? 2 hours for a fresh run during business hours, 4 off hours, I said. And you'll get more than promises. By Friday, you'll have a documented runbook, deputy training schedules, and a dual owner protocol so no single point of failure exists again. The silence that followed wasn't hostile anymore. It was calculation. Priya finally folded her hands. We want that in writing. And one more thing. I waited. The renewal contract, she said, glancing at Douglas. We want her signature on it. Not his. Hers. Douglas didn't hesitate. Done. Clive, lurking at the edge of the room, shot forward. This is absurd. Contracts go through the CFO's office, not anymore. Priya cut him off without looking. Not if we're the client. Clive's protests evaporated into the carpet. Douglas gave a single nod, sealing it. The contract would bear my name. I gathered the documents calmly, though inside I felt the tectonic shift. The client had chosen governance over gloss, and they had chosen me over him. As the meeting closed, I knew the question wasn't whether I would return, it was what position I would claim when the dust settled. The summons came less than an hour after the client meeting. Douglas's assistant led me back into the CEO's office, where the blinds were half drawn against the glare of the afternoon sun. Legal counsel sat at the far end of the table with a folder already open, notes lined up in neat stacks. Douglas motioned for me to sit opposite him, his face pale but steadier than it had been all morning. Ava, he began. We can't afford patchwork anymore. The clients want stability. So do I. He pushed the folder toward me. Inside was a draft of a new role, Director of Predictive Systems. Direct reporting line to the CEO. Performance-based compensation. Authority to select and train deputies. A timeline to codify everything into policy. I read every line slowly, feeling each word sink into me like anchors finally finding ground. 15 years of invisible scaffolding, now given a name and structure. Before I could sign, the door slammed open. Clive burst in, his cheeks flushed, tie askew, eyes sharp with indignation. I should be present for this discussion, he barked. I am the chief financial officer. Douglas didn't even look up. You nearly cost us our largest client because you didn't understand the infrastructure you were cutting. Clive's jaw worked furiously. That's an exaggeration, Legal interrupted, her tone cool. Not when the audit log shows a blocked attempt to alter compliance flags from a workstation under your office. That isn't an exaggeration. Mr. Harrington, it's evidence. She slid a printed excerpt across the table. Clive's hands curled into fists, but his words caught in his throat. The silence stretched until Douglas finally lifted his eyes. Leave, he said. No raised voice, no drama, just finality. Clive froze, then turned stiffly on his heel and stormed out. The door shut behind him with a thud that sounded like the end of an era. By the end of the week, the board made it official. Clive was voted out, escorted off the premises with less ceremony than he had ever shown others. Meanwhile, the client contract renewal bore my signature, delivered back with Priya's approving note. For the first time, my name carried the company's future, not hidden in the code, but written in ink. I left the building late Friday, the Manhattan streets glowing with evening light. People hurried past me with the usual rush, but my steps were unhurried. For 15 years, quiet had meant replaceable. Now they finally understood quiet means essential. And as I crossed the avenue, I knew my story inside those walls was no longer ending. It was only beginning.